Hello, I'm very happy to do a video for the children. I hope that you enjoy it. Now, I don't know if you remember last time I spoke to you, we thought about being thankful, about saying thank you to people, and about saying thank you to God. And I asked you to do a list, and if you couldn't write it down, to do it on your fingers. Well, I've been doing a list. I'm just going to show you a little bit of it, look. And so far I've got 143 reasons to thank God. That's amazing, isn't it? And there are lots more. I don't know if you've had a chance to think about why we should thank God. He's done so many wonderful things for us. So we should be thankful, and I hope that you are. Now, there's lots of different ways of saying that we've become a Christian. We can say, I've become a Christian, I've been born again, I've been saved, I've been forgiven, I've been adopted into God's family. Lots and lots of different ways. And I'm going to tell you a story about being redeemed. There was a boy called Dylan, and Dylan really wanted a sailing boat. It's quite handy that the seagulls just went over them. And he couldn't afford a sailing boat. He wasn't from a rich family and he couldn't afford one. So he thought, I know what I'll do, I'll make one. And so he scouted round to see what he could find in the house and in the garage, and he found a nice piece of wood like this, look. Found a piece of wood like that to make the main part of the sailing boat. And he found a cane to make the mast, and he found some material to make a sail. And this was in the days when you could go to school. I know that you haven't been to school for a long time, but he could go to school, and so when he got home he had to do his homework, and then after he'd done his homework he spent hours and hours and hours making a boat, and he made a sailing boat. And I can't show you one exactly the same as the one he made, but I've got one here to give you some idea. He made a sailing boat, and his wasn't blue like this, his was red and white. And can you guess why it was red and white? I'll give you another clue. That's what the boat was called, YNWA. I hope that's the right way around. Now, a lot of you support Liverpool, and YNWA is You'll Never Walk Alone, because Dylan supported Liverpool and so his boat was red and white. Now, he put some string on the front of the boat because he was going to take it and sail it on a boating lake. There's quite a big boating lake where he lived. I don't know if you've tried the remote control boats at Picky Park. Have you had a go on those? I think I'm going to go up there and have a go one day. He took his boat to a boating lake, and unfortunately it was quite windy, so he had to hold on to the string really tight so the boat didn't blow away. But unfortunately a dog came and jumped up him, and he was so shocked he just let go of the string, and the boat went out into the middle of the boating lake and it got stuck on an island. That was sad. He'd made that boat, spent hours and hours and hours making that boat, and now he'd lost it, couldn't get it back. The water was too deep to go in, and it was stuck on an island right in the middle, couldn't reach it, couldn't get a big stick and try and get it back that way. And so he went home. He was really sad. After a few weeks, he was walking along the road and he came to a shop that sold antiques and collectibles, and in the window he saw his boat, YNWA, and he couldn't believe it. He said, that's my boat. So he went into the shop and he said to the shopkeeper, look, that's my boat, I made it, I lost it, it's my boat. And the shopkeeper said, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to buy it. That was a sad thing, wasn't it? Because it had been his boat, really. He was the one who made it. So he went home and he said to his parents, I haven't got even enough money to buy my boat back. And his parents said, well, look, we'll lend you the money and you can pay us back week after week after week from your pocket money. It will take a long time, is that all right? And Dylan said, yes, that's fine. So Dylan got the money from his parents, went to the shop, gave the shopkeeper the money, and he got his boat back. And he said, I made you, I lost you, I found you, I bought you back. And that is what being redeemed means. God has redeemed us. It says in the Bible that He's redeemed us with the precious blood of Christ. Jesus died for us so we could be saved, so we could be forgiven, so we could be redeemed, so we could receive Jesus as our own Saviour and Lord. And I would always encourage everybody to know Jesus, to love Jesus, and to serve Jesus.
The reading this morning is taken from Ecclesiastes chapter 7, beginning at verse 1. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money, and the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him.
The book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament is a wisdom book, and it's a great book. It's so timeless and relevant to our lives even today. The writer's telling us that basically there are two ways of looking at life. You can look at life under the sun, putting God out of the picture completely, which is what most people do, or you can look at life under heaven, that is, with a heavenly perspective. If you look at life under the first way, life will be futile and meaningless. But if you look at life under heaven with God's perspective, you will discover meaning and purpose to absolutely everything. And these two different views of life are on a direct collision course. Back in chapter 3, we learned that there's a time for everything under heaven. And what the writer's doing there, he's pointing us to God, who has a purpose. But of course, to have a purpose, he must be in control. So here in chapter 7, we see the writer teaching us about the sovereignty of God. I love that phrase. It's a great theological phrase. God is sovereign. And by that we mean not just that he's in control, but that he has ordained everything that ever comes to pass. Every Christian believes in the sovereignty of God, at least on the surface. But I think it's the most difficult of doctrines to get into your bloodstream, to get into your system, especially when life gets tough, as it so often does, and as it has been recently for all of us. Ecclesiastes 7 begins with a little proverb. A good name is better than fine perfume or precious ointment. A good reputation is very precious. But then he says this, and the day of death better than the day of birth. Now that sounds very odd, doesn't it? The pessimist will agree with that. The day of your death is better than the day of your birth. The pessimist at death will go, phew, it's over. All the suffering, all the pain, all the hassles in life, all so pointless and meaningless, at last, at death, it's all over. But for the Christian, the day of death is better than the day of birth for a very different reason. Because for the Christian, death is that moment when we go to be with the Lord. For me, to live is Christ, to die is gain. We need the perspective of life under heaven, and we need to discard our old view of life under the sun. He then says some strange things. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of the mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure. Herman Melville was a great writer. He wrote many books, including the famous book Moby Dick. And Melville said this: "Not until we learn that one grief outweighs 1,000 joys will we ever know what Christianity is trying to teach us." And Spurgeon, the famous Victorian preacher in London, he said that the good that he experienced in the good times of life, he could put it all on a little teaspoon. Whereas the good that he experienced in the bad times of life, he said it was incalculable. It was like an ocean. And this is one of the best kept secrets of Christianity. We learn so little in the good times of life. We learn and gain so little at parties. But we gain so much wisdom, so much benefit from the bad times in life. What the writer's doing here, he's calling us to ponder the sovereignty of God. Verse 13, consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider this. God has made the one as well as the other. In other words, God has ordained it. God has planned it. And he has a purpose in it and a purpose for it. In the books of wisdom in the Old Testament, like this book, Ecclesiastes, it's the wise person who considers the bad times, not just the good times. The bad times, the times of suffering and pain and disappointment and hurt, they have a meaning and they have a purpose from God. So it's better to go to the house of mourning where there is sadness, because we learn so much there. Now, we don't spend our whole life there, but it's good to be there because we learn so much and we change and we grow. But when we go to the house of feasting, when we go to the party, we actually learn and gain so little. This is wisdom. And God has ordained both the good times and the bad. Joni Eareckson Tada is a remarkable lady with an amazing faith in God. And as you listen to her speak and as you read her books, it's so clear that she has the highest view of God. She believes 100% in the sovereignty of God's wisdom and God's goodness. She has suffered so much in her life. How could she ever have such a high view of God? Well, it's because she has suffered so much. And she can see God's hand in her affliction. God's sovereignty has been manifest to her in the dark side of life. Other people have suffered greatly, just like Joni, but look at it completely differently. Joni looks at it with faith and with trust and with wisdom. She understands that God is sovereign and has a purpose in the worst moments of life. This is the best kept secret of Christianity. Why do we go to a party? We go to a party to get away from it all. But the wise person reflects upon the wisdom and the good providence of God in the worst of times. Worldly wisdom says the worst times in life are the worst. Godly wisdom says the worst times in life actually turn out for my eternal good. The writer says, let us take it to heart. My times are in your hand. My God, I wish them there. My life, my friends, my soul, I leave entirely to your care. My times are in your hand, whatever they may be, pleasing or painful, dark or bright, as best may seem to thee. My times are in your hand. Why should I doubt or fear? My Father's hand will never cause his child a needless tear. My times are in thy hand. Jesus the crucified, those hands my cruel sins had pierced, are now my guard and guide. My times are in your hand. I'll always trust in thee, and after death, at thy right hand, I shall forever be. God is sovereign. We don't understand everything, but we trust him in the good times and especially in the bad times. God bless.